Good evening, everyone. Hi, everybody. I think most or all of you in this room know who I am, but on the off chance I haven't met anyone in here, I'm John Field. I'm the Pacific Salmon Commission's Executive Secretary. Very glad to see all of you here. And I know Mike, our recipient, will be glad to see all of you in the room. We are recording tonight's event and we're projecting it on Zoom. I'd like to welcome those of you who are online as well, and we'll open the floor to those who are on the Zoom webinar later in the program. But before I get started and perhaps boring you with what I have to say, I'd like to turn it over to our Commissioner Murray Ned, who has a few remarks and some welcoming things to say.
Thank you, John. in our language. Yeah, I guess just to begin this evening, before we start ourselves out in a good way, we've asked some of our cultural folks from the Fraser Valley, the Stalo, to come out. And as I mentioned, start us off in a good way. And we wanted to share a little bit from a cultural perspective about Mike and his ancestral name and where it comes from. And I'll get to that in a bit. But I wanted to share these words on behalf of the First Nations Caucus and the Canadian section. And I'll launch right into it. And I want to acknowledge the territory that we're on, the three nations, I almost said Lacamel. I could be fighting words. That's our sister community out in the valley. The Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. And we had hoped they would be available to conduct some of the ceremonial work this evening. They're busy folks. And so I'm really pleased to have some of our Stalo out here today. And some things just happen for a reason, because that's where Mike originally got his ancestral name, was out in the Stalo territory. And, you know, typically for something like this in our culture, and I should profess right away is that I don't know everything about my culture, and I try and learn all the time through some of the cultural leaders we'll hear about later. And I do my best to learn and then convey some messaging from that. But we would typically set the table. We'd have a dinner and we'd ensure that people are well fed, not so grumpy, ready for a good evening. And even before the dinner, we would open up with a dinner song. And in essence, that brings our ancestors to the forefront with us to share the evening. And in this case, it would be Larry Rutter and, you know, his family and ancestors that would be joining us as well. So just to share a little bit about myself, I was introduced as the Commissioner Ned, and this will kind of relate to where we come from as far as our territory. And my ancestral name is Colossenton. It's a name that's been handed down from generation to generation. And I can't begin to understand how old it is. And I can go back a few generations to my great-grandfather, and he carried the name Colossenton. He actually carried two names. The other name was Salmon. And the former and original Colossenton was a warrior and a chief. And that was the original one. My great-grandfather had that till the day he passed. And then the name sat dormant for quite some time till my dad, my late father, Clarence Ned Jr., took the name on. And in about 2012, we had a memorial for my dad. And at that time, it was shared with myself, and the name was bestowed to me, but also to my two sons. And the importance of the name is to make sure it's carried on and respecting our ancestors. And in terms of where I'm from, it's Samath. It's one of the Stalo communities, and it's in the heart of the Lower Fraser, I would say, for the most part. And as I mentioned, we're part of the Stalo communities. We are 24 First Nations today. Before we were divided, probably in the mid-50s or so, there would have been, I think, 4 to 5 tribes that makes up the Stalo. And pretty good fishers, as most of you will already know. And when we talk about the Stallow, there's a few references that associate us to the resource and the territory. And the Stallow is the river of all rivers, the Fraser River. It's known as the Fraser River today, but we call it the Stallow. And the other one is people of the river. And if you look at all of the villages, both former and current, we're all situated along the Fraser River for the most part, because we've lost a lot of our territory in the past to the Indian Act and other things like that. And then by extension, we're also Coast Salish. So I want to acknowledge our tribal colleagues and family from the US, because that's 56 tribes and nations in the Pacific Northwest. Before there was a border, we didn't recognize it, and they were just family. And we went from longhouse to longhouse to engage, to business, barter, and trade. And of course, we've got wives and family in many of those areas as well. So when I think about that, I think about one of our Halkomelem names, our terms that we use, which is Letsamot, one heart, one mind. And just recognizing the territory that we are responsible for today and into the future generations. And it really reflects that we're all connected, all things are connected. When we think about water, land, air, we have to associate everything to Letsamot. So we're here to honor Larry Rutter, of course. I never had the chance to meet him. I wish I would have. And it's such a good thing to be able to carry on that legacy and memory. And Mr. Staley, about 10 years ago, and I won't steal too much of Ken Malway, Willalix thunder, but about 10 years ago, Mike started to talk about retirement. We thought, oh boy, we better acknowledge this guy before he departs. And 10 years after, he's still around. But so this leads to his ancestral name, and Willalix had it in his heart to make sure we acknowledged him before he retired. I don't think he's ever going to retire by the looks of it. And Ken will get into it more, but his name is Saliamuk, and Ken will explain what that means when he gets on the call later. In our language, Sal Tamuk is our land, it's our resource. Saliamuk, there's the territorial connection. So he's now one of us, always has been, even before the name. And we're really, really proud to be able to call him a colleague and a friend, but also the expertise that he brings to our nations, not only ours, but to many other nations, and to this regime, the commission and the treaty has been amazing. So when I think about the PSC family, I also think about Letsamot and the work we have to do, one heart, one mind, and the need for us to work together for the salmon. So I wanted to share that context in the term in a way that kind of explained how we arrived at Mike's name. And as I mentioned, Ken will elaborate on that even more when he's on the call later. And I wanted to introduce Weecham and our cultural leaders that are gonna share a song. And again, that's how we conduct business regularly, to set the tone for the evening, bring our ancestors here with us. Weecham.
Wanted to thank everybody here today and our friends and family on Zoom. You know, my name is Weecham from Chilliwack Land, and part of our tradition is we teach our young ones how we walk with our gowit. Our elders have been teaching us, and I want each of us to introduce ourselves. I'm from Chilliwack Land and in Squaw.
Hello, my name is Francis Williams, traditional name Talomathip. Who's here? Hello, my name is Melissa Sam. My traditional name is Lil Haloya, and I'm from Sumas First Nation and Swali First Nation.
Eistwil, Ayachulamat Telsqui, Talitzel Kwa Tiakdal. My government name's Jalissa. I come from Danstalo and my
Well, it's a big honor to be here, you know. My mate and myself have been working with Mike for many, many years. You know, and it was a big, almost a hurt when we heard that he was gonna retire. And it got sad when we didn't get to hear his voice on. For many, many years, he fought for our rights. He's a very, very good man, and we're honored to be here today. We want to open up with a prayer for everybody so you get home safe and your families are safe, and especially sending out some love and prayers to Mr. Staley and his family. Really thanking him for the work that he does.
Thank you very much, Murray, for, as you said, setting the right tone for the evening and opening the ceremony in the right way. I know on behalf of the commission, I can express our thanks for all of that and what's to come later this evening. The other tone I wanted to set for this evening is Happy Valentine's Day. I was saying to some friends just a minute ago that Valentine's and the PSC don't go particularly well together, and they never really have. But on this Valentine's Day, I think when many of us are separated from our sweethearts and our family and those we care about, I think it's fitting that we take a moment to reflect on one of our colleagues who means so much to us, to tell that person that their efforts count, and that we appreciate what they do to lift us up. Because this time each year in the PSC, we can come together and we can recall that we're all aiming for the same goal, sustainable salmon fisheries, and that there are some among us who make that work a little easier and a little more enjoyable, regardless of which country they're from. Some of you who have been around for many years in the PSC process know the history here. Some of you are brand new. Some of you didn't know Larry. But when the commission established this award in 2016, it set out to do a few things. It set out to honor a person or an organization that had advanced Pacific salmon conservation or research through their unique accomplishments, and to honor Larry Rutter's legacy as a unifying force between Canada and the United States and all the people that reside within them. Larry, of course, believed in that unity, as those of you who worked with Larry knew, and his long career demonstrated all of that. He spent 3 decades working with the Treaty Indian tribes in the United States, the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service, and of course here at home in the Pacific Salmon Commission. And all that meant that Larry had an immense impact on the work that we do here in implementing the treaty collectively to conserve and manage our treasured salmon. I'm also happy to report that, as in past years, Larry's widow, Deborah Shaver, has joined us here tonight. And I know, Deborah, I can say on behalf of the commission, it's really quite an honor that you show up every year and that you're here to help us remember Larry's legacy. It means very much to all of us. As usual, I know I say this every year, but I feel like it bears repeating that choosing a recipient was really difficult. We get a number of well-qualified, very well-deserving nominees each year from across the borders and throughout the region, from Alaska down through British Columbia, the Yukon, Pacific Northwest. Each year, the selection committee is really humbled by the work that we see in those pieces of paper, the knowledge and the dedication that so many people have poured into the PSC as an organization. And it proves really hard every year to choose just one person. We would love to pick many every year. But our rules say that we have to pick one person, and we did. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Susan Bishop and Neil Davis. Susan is here with us tonight. Neil might be online, I'm not sure. They served with me on the selection committee and helped choose this year's 2024 recipient of the Larry Rutter Memorial Award, Mr. Mike Staley. Now, Mike, I think the rumor has probably gone around this week that Mike can't be here this evening, and it's not that he's unappreciative. He sent me many messages to say how sorry he was that he couldn't be here, but he took a long planned and well-deserved trip to New Zealand with his wife, and it was just out of range and couldn't join remotely. However, Marcel Shepard is here tonight to accept the award on Mike's behalf, and I'll invite him up in a moment to say a few words. I did mention at the outset that we're recording the ceremony, and we'll post that video to our YouTube channel in the coming days. So Mike knows that, and he'll be able to come back and take a look at everything that has happened this evening that I know will have a big impact on him. I didn't know Mike. I don't know Mike particularly well. I'm a relative newcomer to salmon world, and I have intersected with his career just over the last few years that I've been executive secretary. There may be others in the room who don't know Mike particularly well. I thought I'd give a little bit of background and then set the stage for others who want to go into more personal detail. Mike received his Master's of Science degree from UBC, University of British Columbia, in the late 70s, where he was mentored by Doctors Carl Walters, Ray Hilborn, and C.S. Holling. At UBC, he worked alongside Doctors Hilborn and Walters in the Cooperative Fisheries Research Unit, a joint venture between UBC, the province of British Columbia, and DFO. And then Mike went from there. He went on to start his own consulting company, International Analytic Science, and through IAS gave Mike Lapointe, PSC's former chief biologist, his first job way back in the midst of history in 1987. The two Mikes then worked alongside each other for many years through the PSC process, and I know they enjoyed each other's company very much. Mike's relationship with Indigenous society began when IAS was contracted by DFO to provide salmon management and science courses throughout the Fraser River watershed during the 1980s. And it was through those interactions that Mike grew to admire the First Nations relationship with salmon and their cultural significance. And I think already this evening we've seen what an impact that had on Mike and the societies he worked with. Becoming the first non-DFO Canadian representative to join the PSC's Fraser River Technical Committee in the early 1990s, Mike remains dedicated and essential in supporting Canada's voice and specifically that of Indigenous people in our Fraser process and beyond. Mike was also a fisheries biologist with the Fraser River Aboriginal Fisheries Secretariat and was instrumental in supporting what later became and transitioned into the Fraser Salmon Management Council. That council was groundbreaking as a collaborative management agreement between 76 Fraser River and Marine Approach Indigenous communities and the Canadian government. Mike continues that work as the co-chair of the council's Joint Technical Committee. Through his commitment and working with Indigenous peoples on behalf of the salmon, Mike was bestowed with the name that Marie told us about, Salmon. I hope I got that right. Good, okay. And that translates, I have read that translates to he who can predict the future and wears many hats. And I think we'll hear more about that from Chief Ken Malloway. Mike's approach to salmon science and management has always been cooperative and technically critical. I have worked with Mike scientifically through the Secretariat staff and found him to be a great colleague. The mentorship that he's provided has been a privilege to both new and experienced biologists alike from the US and Canada, a real unifier, just like Larry himself. And so for these and so many other reasons you'll hear about from the speakers more eloquent than me, we congratulate you, Mike, wherever you are right now on this well-deserved award. And Marcel, if you want to come up, we can.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So good evening, everybody. My name is Marcel Shepard. I do see some faces in the crowd that I know. I've been in the process 20 some years, I think 24, something like that. Ken will correct me, I'm sure. I am currently the independent chair of the Fraser Salmon Management Board, which is the collaborative management agreement between 76 First Nations and DFO, and I'm very proud of that position. It was a dream job for me. It's like when they interviewed me, they said, why do you want this job? I said, I don't know. It feels like there's just things happen in life and things start to culminate, and this job has my name on it and nobody else is going to get it. So I got it. Like I wasn't going to be beat out by anybody. I've been on the Fraser panel for 25 years. Or 24 years or something along those lines. I have been an advocate of Upper Fraser fisheries and Upper Fraser First Nations. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. I have a lot of great connections, a lot of family people up there. I am a Wet'suwet'en First Nation, so I come from the headwaters of both the Skeena and the Fraser. And I come from a long house tradition. I come from the house Yaxawatkas, which is the dark house. Don't equate that with my character. I'm also part of Gitzeahu, which is the Big Frog clan. So I come from a big house tradition, much like the Stalo. And so, yeah, I won't make this too long. I know that others want to speak. And a lot of those people have had a long relationship with Mike, including Ken. And right by right, it should have been Ken here tonight. And I'm hoping he's listening. And you know, Ken, I'm looking forward to what Ken has to say. But I'm very honored to accept the award. And I have a few words that I'd like to. I've prepared for him as well, for Mike. Let me just start by saying what an honor it is to accept this award on behalf of Mike Staley, or as we now know, Saleya Much, his Stalo name, for those of you who don't know. And by the end of tonight, you will all know it. In my humble opinion, no one deserves this recognition for a lifetime of service to salmon and salmon people more than Mike. His years of dedicated service speak for itself. The man has assisted many of us in understanding the very complex and sometimes zany and often illogical world of salmon management. I have known Mike since 1997, when I first got into the business. Mike was someone I watched very closely because of the way he conducted himself, always calm, gracious, and unflappable, even in the most heated meetings. I could never understand how he could do that. It's a gift. You can't, in this world, it gets very hot, especially as an Indigenous. And in the past, we had a lot of very heated conversations that continue even to this day. But Mike was always calm, always mindful. And I always appreciated that. So he was calm, gracious, and unflappable, even in these heated meetings. The guy has a razor sharp calculus combined with a personal charm, seldom, if ever, duplicated. He is a genuine mensch who cares deeply for First Nations and has demonstrated time and again his commitment to the cause of First Nations rights, especially in relation to salmon. For these reasons, I am grateful to be in Mike's orbit. Moreover, Mike is a friend whom I've shared both tragedy and comedy with over the years. I have listened to him I have visited him and Janice out in Tofino when they used to live in Tofino. They now live in Ladysmith, and I can't wait to go visit their new home. And they have always been such awesome hosts and opened their home to me and my family. There is no shortage of drama within the fisheries management world, and I've spent many a night with Mike solving all the world's problems over a great meal and a bottle or two of wine. As a friend, I also look up to Mike as a role model, a mentor, and not just because he's smart and thoughtful, although that helps, but more importantly, because he is compassionate, a great listener with a wry sense of humor. You can just see the spark in his eye when he's explaining something to a new recruit like Aiden or Kelsey or Sabrina or any of the other folks that he's mentored over the years, young folks that have been in these rooms. They know who they are. He just has a certain charm and a sparkle in his eye. It is a gift that many have benefited from. He is modest and understated, but make no mistake, he is brilliant and can go toe-to-toe with the best in science or just about anything. With respect to matters of the fish kind, I always remember something Mike said about fish and fish management, and it goes something like this. His brother, believe this or not, was part of the team that designed and built the Canada arm for the space shuttle. That's a pretty big accomplishment. His brother is also a big brainiac, obviously. Of course, it's a very complex undertaking. But when his brother hears what Mike does, he simply says, now that's hard. And when you think about it, it really is. That being said, Mike has made the world of salmon management understandable and even enjoyable because he takes the time to help people understand the complexity and nuance that is always at play. For these reasons and more, I am deeply honored to accept this award on behalf of Mike Staley and would now call upon our caucus members. Murray, is that what we want to do? We want to call upon our caucus members to come up and to acknowledge this achievement with Mike, even though he's not here. So hands up to Mike. Thank you.
Come on, don't be shy.
Yeah. You bet. And this is just a fraction of the people that have been under the influence of Mike. Don Hall, I think, is a colleague. They went to school together. Is that right, Don? We're very. Anyways, so thank you, folks. You want to come up?
I'm gonna say Mike song.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we have our First Nation leaders up standing, representing our people. And our brother standing in for our brother Mike. We have in our hearts to share a song. And I hope that Mike gets to see this again. And share with your brother. the love of the people of the First Nations people, for the hard work that he has put in, guiding us from day one. You know, not many men can say that they did the work that Mike said. A lot of people can say they got the chance to sit and learn this man. Very well respected man in the Stella territory. Fought very hard for us, so we wanted to. Myself, thanking you for standing in for Mike. We want to share this song, give Mr. Staley some stretch, love. And when we share these songs, use this as our prayer. The power of prayer can go anywhere in the world when you put your mind to it, your heart into it. I know Mike is going to feel the love from all his colleagues. Wishing that he could be here tonight. Thanking the wife of the man, Larry. Thank you for being here. You have to say it to him too after.
Thank you very much. And we will be sure that Mike sees and hears all of those words when we share the ceremony online. As I said, there were a few people in addition to those who have spoken who want to share a few thoughts about Mike. We have a couple people here in the room tonight and Chief Ken Malloway online. Perhaps I'll turn to Chief Russ Jones for the opening remarks and then we'll go from there.
Singhasala, Nangjingwas, Hanudukigaga. Good evening, everyone. My Haida name is Nangjingwas, and that's and my English name is Russ Jones. So Nangjingwas was my great grandfather's grandfather's name, who was a chief in Skidegate, Haida Gwaii, where we live. So I wanted to start saying, it's great. I'm really so happy to be here to acknowledge the contributions that Mike has made to the Pacific Salmon Commission and as well as to First Nations. Mike is like a guru of Fraser salmon management for First Nations. You could say he's like the Yoda in Star Wars. I wanted to talk a little bit just about how I've got to know Mike through the years, and I know it's shortly after when the Sparrow decision went through in 1990. I visited with Mike about how he could support the First Nations Summit, and I was helping Miles Richardson at the time, to make some progress on fishing rights in the Fraser. And it's such a big challenge with all the nations involved, right? But they thought there was an opportunity to do that. And I wasn't involved further in that. It went more of in a political direction. And then Mike got involved in the Salmon Commission. But I remember visiting Mike in his office in Kerrisdale, and he shared it with Edwin Blewett, who is an economist, and he, realizing that he's a real expert, in his field, and he's proven over the years. Mike became did a lot of work with the BC Aboriginal Fisheries Commission, and so he and I and others participated in a policy analysis group in the 90s who were constantly looking at fishing issues and how First Nations could be supported in advancing our rights, in salmon fisheries. And then around 2001, like I was involved in the Northern Panel, and I can remember, and I didn't see Mike much during that process. That was kind of when the treaty kind of had fallen apart. Some of the annexes hadn't been renewed. There were several years where there were no bilateral meetings between Canada and the U.S. And then, but then we moved, and now I very rarely wouldn't have much interaction among First Nations at the time, in the process. We were all appointed by DFO and went to panel meetings, but never really got together. And Chief Gibby Jacob was appointed as a commissioner around 2000, and Mike and I worked with Chief Jacobs to establish the First Nations caucus. And so we brought together all the First Nation representatives and talked about kind of what we needed to kind of make progress in this process. And Mike at the time was the only first person representing First Nations in the process that was working with First Nations. And the caucus spoke out quite loudly that what we needed was more technical support. And so that became the focus of the caucus back in 2002. And we grew with the caucus to, at that time, about 22 people. So probably about 10 technical staff or so. And then, and now it's currently a little over 30 individuals who are involved in the process, which is something like over about 25 or more percent, of the Canadian delegation. Mike was always really helpful. Like when we had to organize meetings and things like that, he would you could call on him and he'd go and arrange things to get meetings in place, and he'd even use his credit card for meals and for meetings when we needed that kind of support. And then a little more recently, around 2004 or so, I was involved in a panel that was looking at fisheries in British Columbia, was a First Nations panel. It was appointed by the BC Aboriginal Fisheries Commission, the First Nations Summit, and British Columbia AFN. And so Marcel Shepard was, and Neil Starrett and I were the panel. And we worked with a technical committee, and Mike was one member of that technical committee, along with Don Hall, Edwin Blewett, who was an economist, and Andrew Day, who also was doing work on the west coast of Vancouver Island at the time. And we made it a point, to emphasize, kind of what the needs were in terms of conservation in terms of First Nations involvement in management, First Nation allocations of fish, right? As well as the issues around access to fish for food social ceremonial purposes. So Mike was a key person in preparing a lot of that background information and telling the story in 2004. And that report and the report of Doctors Pierce and McRae at the time, resulted in the PICFI program, which was aimed at increasing access to First Nations for salmon, as well as kind of creating the opportunity for inland commercial fisheries as well. And Mike continued, working with in the Fraser, for up to today. So I think I just wanted to mention, that he's made significant contributions, to First Nations, and he's you can see today, how it's appreciated what he's done, and any of us can only hope to kind of build on this work that he's done over the last three or so decades. So Hawa, thank you everyone. Igi Dalanguslas, Skaudagi Dalangathel, Kil Laga. Thank you for listening.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Commissioner Jones. We have Ken Malloway ready.
Thanks. And thanks for the previous speakers. Oh, first of all, when I was a boy, my grandfather, he told me about a man that they called him Aliyah. And he said, I said, what does that mean? And he said, he knows it. I said, well, what does he know? And he said, well, everything. And I asked him what he did, and he said, he's the one that tells us how many fish are coming back this year. And he knew how many sockeye were coming back, how many Chinook. There's 6 different species of salmonids, including steelhead. He knew all the different runs and how they're going to come back. And he might say, oh, it's going to be really big runs this year. Or he might say, there's a really good run of Chinook, but not very good sockeye, or vice versa. And then sometimes he'd say, it's not going to be much of anything. You better go hunting because it's a bad year. Salmon runs have crashed many times over the last few thousand years. Sometimes they would just crash. And Aliyah was the name of the person that was his profession, was to forecast. And that's what my grandpa told me when I was young. So when Mike talked about retiring, I wanted to do something for him, and I wanted to give him an Indian name. And so I talked to Murray Ned and others about it, and they all agreed to it. And so I talked to some of the language instructors. My daughter is one of them, Jessica, she's a language teacher. And Mary Stewart is another language teacher. She's one of Jessica's teachers. And I told him what I wanted to do. So I was really helpful. I was really glad for Mary to come and help me, because I explained to her what I wanted. And so she's the one that came up with the name Salem. Alea is the person that does the forecasting. And the first part of the word Salea, say, it means that he dreams with his eyes open. And the last part, Much, means he wears many hats. So literally, he dreams with his eyes open, and he's a forecaster, and he wears many hats. So it describes Mike to a T. I became the Interior Indian Fisheries Commission chairman in 1985. Pretty abruptly, I just arrived on the scene, and my second meeting day, they made me the chairman. And I was working with Gary John at the time, and he was my coordinator. And I said, we need to hire a fisheries biologist. And I said, I got money from DFO to hire a biologist. And so we advertised, and we narrowed it down to two people. And one was a First Nations woman. She's from the interior somewhere, I can't remember where. But she had just graduated from university, just graduated. But this other guy, he had a huge, huge resume. And it's so impressive. I said, we got to hire this guy. And Gary was saying, well, the other one is a First Nation. I said, but she's never worked anywhere before. She just out of school. This guy, he's worked with First Nations and DFO. And I said, we got to hire him. So we hired him, and he came to work for us. And I brought him with me to the BC Aboriginal Fisheries Commission as well, and then to Stalo Nation. So he worked for us, the Stalo Nation, Stalo Fisheries Authority. Kind of an unfortunate acronym, SFA, but that's beside the point. He worked for us for many years, and at the time we had about 4 fisheries biologists working for us. Right now we probably got 14 or 15. We got almost as many as DFO. But Mike has been a huge, huge help, for the, like it was mentioned earlier, for my nephew Aiden Fisher. Mike has taken him under his wing and helped him and others so much. We've been traveling together on the road, doing road shows. Every time something came up, we went on a road show to consult with First Nations at the BC Aboriginal Fisheries Commission and the AFN. And we would go out on the road, and we would consult with First Nations about well, first it's about the Sparrow decision when it came down, and that was one of Mike's favorite topics, is the Sparrow decision. And then the AFS came up after that because of the Sparrow decision. And then ARAM, I was in the room in Ottawa when we invented the ARAM, and Mike Staley was there with me and Simon Lucas. It was invented in the room in Ottawa. I was also in a room when Picture was invented. Old commercial fishermen, white guys, came up to me and said, we want to get out, but we want to be compensated. And we think that it should go to First Nations. So I've been connected in all these different things, and Mike is always right in the center of it. And we relied on him so heavily. And when he said he was going to retire, we were scared, scared because we were going to lose him. But my nephew Aiden Fisher's hit the ground running, and I'm not scared anymore. I got Aiden. But Mike has done so much for us. He's not quite retired yet. I'm happy to hear that he's in New Zealand. I was there. But like I said, we were always on the road. One time we were at the airport. We were flying down to SeaTap, for a meeting with the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. And we were late, and we were trying to go through the metal detector. And every time Mike went through, he set off the metal detector. And they kept getting him, like, take his glasses off, take his belt off, and take his shoes off. And I said, he's going to be naked here pretty soon. Let's just let him go through, eh? And the woman said, he keeps setting it off. There's something's up, eh? And I leaned over and I said, Mike he's got a metal plate in his head from the war. She said, oh my God, I'm sorry. And Mike was going, I. And I said, it's okay, Mike, it's okay. And he said, and then she said, go ahead, you go through. And he was really embarrassed because I said that, but I was just trying to get us to go through it. But, we were always on the road. We were always doing those road shows, and he was always there to help us out. Eh? So I'm happy that he's able to retire comfortably. He built that huge house and in his property over there, and he got a pretty good penny for it. And so all these years of him working for us has done wonders for our community. So Saleyamuk is going to be missed by our people. One of our friends sent me a picture on Facebook, and she said, I found this old picture of Mike Staley and you guys. It was back in the 80s at the old Chiacan Hall. And it was a pretty cool picture of Mike. He was standing there with his hands out. He was preaching to the people about fisheries. And I was sitting beside him, much younger, black hair. And there was a guy sitting beside me. The guy sitting beside me was sleeping. I don't know why he was sleeping, but Mike put him to sleep, I guess. But he probably put a lot of people to sleep. We would go on and on and on about fishing. I'm going on and on now. I just wanted to thank you all, and I wanted to thank the people for recognizing Mike before he retires. I'm really glad that he got this honor. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Ken. You came through loud and clear. We appreciate that. This really wouldn't be a Pacific Salmon Commission event if we didn't hear a view from the other side of the border. And so I'm glad to be able to call Commissioner Ron Allen to the front of the room, who'd like to say a few words on behalf of the tribes of the United States.
Well, thank you, John. I think I'm making a few comments and accolades for this honor for Mike Staley, really almost more on behalf of Lorraine Loomis than me. So those of us who were around when we were negotiating in 84, 85, and we all remember Mike being there. And so, Lorraine and I used to look at Mike and we go, he must be one of the biggest pain in the ass for DFNO that they've ever seen, because he could challenge them. And I said, well, yeah, that's true too. But then there was the secretariat. So Jim Wood, Mike LaPointe, and challenging them with regard to, the numbers, the fairness of allocation opportunities and so forth. And like Kenny and Russ and Marcel and Murray, everybody remembers him being Mr. Persistent. So I remember him that way. And Lorraine just kind of went, because he fought so hard for the indigenous people who were up the river, for all different villages, and everybody get their share. And Lorraine would go, does he not know we're Indian too? So we used to have some fun times, and Lorraine could always be pretty frank with Mike. But the thing that I remember about Mike, and I couldn't agree more with all the speakers, the fun stories that Kenny's remembering with Mike. He was always here. He was always here early. He always was here at the end and left late. He was just such a hard, diligent worker. And we just sort of remember him, because he knew the numbers and it seemed like he was just like a soul soldier, a warrior, I guess, for the indigenous people. You kind of looked around, there weren't a lot of biologists and people who had the skill set. And Mike was there and always advocating and challenging and making the case for fairness and opportunity for the indigenous people up the river and all the different villages. And I just remember him just being just a gentle guy who had such a deep, sincere indigenous heart. He cared about what he did. He cared about the rights and the traditional practices of indigenous people, and he made a difference. So I knew Larry well, and I just think this award is very special. And people like Mike and Jerry Morishima and Don Hall and others, so the people who help us as policy people do our job and defend the interests of salmon for salmon people. So somebody said it earlier, that every river has a people, we are salmon people here in the Northwest, and that's Mike Staley. Mike Staley figured it out early on in his career. He became a person who's so dedicated to the people that he was serving. So I know Lorraine is up in the clouds and raising her hands to him. Dan Mike Staley, you did a good job, and this is just an honor that is well deserved for this guy. A lot of years, a lot of dedication, and it just seems it would be weird not to be in these halls and not see Mike Staley. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron, and thanks to all the other speakers that have come up tonight. I was just going to make a quick check and see if there's anyone online who wants to speak. Or if there's anyone else in the room who would like to come up. Okay. I know it's been a great celebration. We've been able to hear from so many different perspectives about Mike's career. I've learned a lot about Mike, and I have learned to appreciate all the things that he's brought to the table for First Nations and to the Pacific Salmon Commission. I'll leave here a little bit wiser, a little bit more appreciative of everything that Mike has done, and so glad that one more year we get to bestow the Larry Rutter Award on someone truly deserving. Nope. Okay. So I think our friends online are also at peace with the evening and ready to call it a night. Thanks very much for all your time and attention tonight. Thank you to those who have traveled from far away to come here and help us celebrate. Thank you to Deborah, and thank you to all. I'll see many of you tomorrow when we wrap up the annual meeting. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.